something about educators and 3D printing that just goes together really well, which is why we have this wonderful panel here. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Chris Lewis. I'm Vice President for Government Affairs at Public Knowledge. And I'm excited about this panel because in my spare time I get to serve on the Alexandria City School Board just across the river in Virginia. And we have a fantastic panel here. I'm going to let them talk about the work that they do with 3D printing in the classroom. So I'll just give a brief introduction for each, and then I'll let each of you take a couple minutes in turn to talk about your work, and then we'll open it up for some questions. First, immediate to my left, we have from the White House, we have Stephanie Santoso from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And Stephanie is a senior policy advisor for making at the White House and is one of the leaders who helped create the White House Maker Faire, which you guys had your first one last year, right?
We did.
All right.
Just announced Week of Making, so follow up to that. So we should talk a little bit more about that later.
Exciting. Next to her, we have John Anderson, and John is from the DC area here. He's an educator at Prince George's Community College, and will be talking to us about the work that they have at the community college level. Next to him, we have Joseph Williams, who got a plug from Congressman Takano, and we look forward to hearing about his work at Paris Union High School. Next to him, we have Andrew Coy. Andrew Coy is the Executive Director of the Digital Harbor Foundation out of Baltimore, and has been working there to lead in creating spaces for young people to engage in technology in the community outside of the education community, but more in the community itself, outside of the public education system. But he is a former teacher as well, and so we're excited to have him here. Next, we have Erin Arden, and Erin is the training manager at MakerBot, one of the leading 3D printing companies in the world. And we're excited to have them as an annual sponsor and supporter of the 3DC event. And then finally, next to her, we have Sophia, and you're going to have to help me out, Sophia.
Georgiou.
It's Georgiou, okay.
Not hard.
Thank you. Sophia is the CEO of the Inventory, and has a cutting-edge educational app that they have developed to support STEAM education, which, if you are not an education policy buff, is the combination of science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math, all into a coordinated curriculum. So thank you, panelists, for being here. And why don't we start first with Steph, and tell us a bit about your connection with 3D printing and education.
Great. Thanks so much to everybody for being here today. Oh. Is this okay? Great, thanks. I've been at the White House for a little over a year, and so I'm the first advisor for making. As you mentioned, last year we hosted the first ever White House Maker Faire, and I'm sure that many of you sort of have seen some of the coverage around that, but that was really a call to action from the President to really call attention to the importance of the maker movement and the importance of technologies like 3D printing that are really democratizing not only design, right, but this ability to take your ideas and develop them into solutions or innovative new products. And I know that a number of really wonderful discussions have already taken place around this earlier today, so I hope that this will be a continuation of that. But at the last White House Maker Faire, one of the big things that we did was to announce a large number of commitments. So these are new initiatives, additional resources, funding coming from federal agencies, as well as foundations, industry, educational institutions that all really focus on, one, this question around how do you empower kids to really engage in STEM education, arts and design through making. A significant portion of that revolves around exposure and enabling kids, students, to be able to learn about 3D modeling and 3D printing, right? That in a lot of ways acts as a pathway, I think, for a lot of students to start to really understand how the, sort of the more abstract principles and concepts that they're learning in science or in engineering or math really apply in the real world. And so that's, where I personally think there's a real inherent power in giving kids that opportunity and providing them with that chance to have an agency and to play a really active role in the process of learning and in the process of education. So, for me, and then, for the White House in general, this has been a real focus area. I think not I think, but I know that the other aspect of 3D printing and additive manufacturing that has been of particular priority has been around impact in entrepreneurship as well as advanced manufacturing. So when we're thinking about fabrication, digital design for the 21st century, how does that additive manufacturing fit into that? And really, it plays a very large role. Before I was at the White House, I was pursuing my PhD in information science, where I was actually studying the development of 3D printing as an industrial tool and sort of the impact that it's had as it's become more democratized as a result of open source projects like RepRap and sort of the role that intellectual property has played in that. So I also, from sort of my own experience in doing research around the technology, kind of see the impact that it's had, not just in areas of education and manufacturing, but also across other fields, whether we're talking about biomedicine or fashion and art or food. So I think I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all, specifically when we're talking about education, what you think will be the future of 3D printing in terms of the role that it will play in changing and evolving the face of education, as well as hearing from you about what you think is needed from the perspective of resources, of support, and how the White House could be helpful in that, how federal agencies could be helpful in that, and how I could personally be helpful in that.
Thank you, Steph. John?
Good afternoon. I was at a Tom Waits karaoke competition yesterday, so I do apologize for my voice. So I am program coordinator of visual communication at Prince George's Community College. I'm a graphic designer and a painter in my background. And yet I was the individual who first acquired a 3D printer for our college in 2013. So I have a feeling that my position up here is not so much one who's on the avant-garde, but who's bringing it to the rear in terms of how community colleges and high schools are looking at this technology, trying to embrace this technology, maybe without the sophistication and background that other inventors and makers have had in the past. By 2014, we had acquired 12 3D printers because we identified that there was a scale issue. If a 3D printer, we had an Affinia, that was our first. If a 3D printer is producing a print based on constraints of speed and size and infill and wall thickness, between 15 and 90 minutes per square inch, and you've got 20 students in the course, and you have maybe 7 or 8 courses that want to use that 3D printer, and it's got a 4 to 5 inch print volume, you need to scale up. And that's just in the fine arts. We haven't even gotten into the engineering area, which I don't participate in, I don't oversee. I try to make relationships with, but they're just now acquiring their first 3D printer this semester. We have nursing as well on the campus, and they're interested in 3D printing, but they haven't acquired a 3D printer yet. So people are looking to us on the campus in terms of what is 3D printing, what are the capabilities of 3D printing? Which means that there is currently an initiative within the administration to put art into STEM. I don't know if they're actually going to shove Arden to STEM. That would be kind of interesting to see that happen from a managerial perspective, but that's their goal. And over the course of the past couple of years, since we were fumbling around trying to figure out what are we doing, we organized 2 symposia and started inviting people from around the community and around the country to present on what they were doing so that educators on our campus and at community colleges throughout Maryland and other colleges and universities in Maryland and Virginia and DC could come and hear what other, I don't know if necessarily experts, but at least people who are more expert than we were, what they were accomplishing as well. And so while we were dealing with the issue of the constraint of build volume and time and so forth, now we're looking at what do we do with budgets now that our community college is facing a $10 million budget shortfall due to cuts in federal, state, and county-wide funding. What do we do with shortfalls in staff? What do we do when our faculty are presented with increases in responsibility? And how can we justify the means of using grants to fulfill further development of our program when it might not be towards the Associate of Applied Sciences curricula that I oversee? And now my voice is going to go. So.
Thank you, John. And Joe.
I'm Joe Williams. I'm the Director of Technology for Paris Union High School District. That's P-E-R-R-I-S, not P-A-R-I-S. We're a high school district in Congressman DeCano's district. We have 10,700 students, about 8 campuses. Low socioeconomic position there with over 75% district-wide on free and reduced lunch. Some schools it's higher, like 90%. And so there's been in the area what people would call an achievement gap. And while that's true, we believe that there's more of an opportunity gap and an access gap. And that if we can close the opportunity and access gap, one of the ways our district has done that is we initiated a Scholar Plus learning and teaching initiative. We branded it Scholar Plus so that every decision that we make district-wide is focused on the learner, the scholar, the student. And in this part of this program is that every student on our campus have a Chromebook that they take home every day. And sometimes a 24/7 one-to-one program is a misnomer, where at the end of the school year, the school collects them. We don't collect them. They go home for the summer. And it's been messy, but learning is messy. And we're fine with that. The school board in our district is comfortable with an acceptable level of messiness in the one-to-one initiative. What this has provided us in our region is that there's more informal learning opportunities for students rather than just formalized learning. And I think the message that I expressed to the people on the panel yesterday, that it is my role as Director of Technology to prepare the conditions for success that 3D printers will have in our ecosystem. Because if we don't change those conditions, if we don't prepare the conditions for success, it's just another thing in the classroom. And some of those things include curriculum, and curriculum that's blended, that it's not the traditional factory model, where they're sitting in rows and columns, and the learning only happens for, when the bell rings for 55 minutes, and then, so the bell rings and it's time to learn, now the bell rings, now quit learning, and then they go to the next class, and the bell rings, time to learn, bell rings, stop learning. So one of the conditions that we need to change is the curriculum. It needs to be blended, it needs to be hybrid. Some of the other conditions in our district are facilities. Our traditional schools are built on a factory model, where we have rows and columns and classroom spaces. Our new model, I'm on the Executive Ed Specs Committee for our district who is building 2 new schools. Our new model is to build into those spaces informal learning opportunities, flexible spaces in the hallways. We don't want to call the library a library, it's a learning commons. We want our classroom spaces to be Center for Applied Learning or Center for Advanced Science Exploration rather than just classrooms. So those are some of the conditions that we need to change. Some of the other conditions are the teaching and learning methods that would be what's known as a growth mindset or a maker mindset, And by the way, I have way too much to tell you, so if you just follow me on Twitter, I'll put all this stuff out there, and you can DM me. And if you're not on Twitter, get a kid or a grandkid to help you out. Grab one in the hallway, and that'll work. Because there's way too much time to take on the panel. But I can tell you that we need partnerships. I am so happy that I won't name specifically the companies that are in the room, but I'm extremely happy they're here. I'm happy that we have access to them, that Congressman Takano was so gracious to invite me out. And I can tell you that a lot of times when we're talking about education, and I know at the end maybe you'll cover this, I can cover policy later, so just remind him we'll cover policy later because it's boring. But I know that President Obama has the Future Ready Schools initiative. And if you're a little unclear about the conditions we need for success, of course you can contact me. But if you look at the Future Ready Schools and you follow that stuff and you look at, there's a thing that they put out yesterday, I believe, about schools can take an assessment if they're future ready. Schools that do those things are ready for 3D printers. They're ready for them to be successful. Otherwise, it's just another thing that they're adding onto the curriculum.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, so my name is Andrew Coy. I'm the Executive Director of the Digital Harbor Foundation, and I got my start in education as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, but I told my kids one day that I could get them a job making a website. And I knew this because I had done that myself. I'd actually dropped out of college a number of times, and one of the times to start a web service. So I said, well, if I can, why don't I? And then I did. I went and found a client that needed a website, found some students, and paired them up with that client. They made a website and got paid for it. And then more kids came knocking on my door. This is in inner city Baltimore. Fast forward a couple of years, this club I started was doing reverse mentoring where students were teaching teachers how to use things for their classrooms and getting paid for this, and sometimes making more money per hour than their own parents, and realizing that there was a future for them in this field called technology. And then, the city was shutting down a number of rec centers, one of which happened to be 2 blocks away from my school. And I said, this rec center should be a tech center, because exactly how Bill was talking about the factory model, rec centers really fit into the factory model economy, where factories needed physically fit, able-bodied people to work in them, and a rec center kind of helped with that. And they needed extended daycare options for second shifters, which a rec center, again, helped out with. But in today's economy, where factories aren't around anymore, they've been shut down and auctioned off, literally, out of places like Baltimore, we need to reimagine a rec center as a tech center and reconnect it to the economic imperatives of our day and age. And so I did that. I ran around and grabbed as many people as would listen and met with them before school, during school, after school, and we transformed this South Baltimore Rec Center, which was shut down, into the Digital Harbor Foundation Tech Center. And we've gone from 20 kids in my after-school club to serving more than 500 kids this last year, and we're growing this year. We've already served more kids in the first 2 months than all of last year. We're on track to serve about 2,500 kids this year, and they come during the school day for field trips. They're after school in semester and month-long programs, in the summer times with camp experiences. And the real focus is on the learner and on them as a creative individual. We ask them, what do you want to make? And then we help support them. And just like scaffolding is supposed to come down from a building, we are trying to break down the support structure that they have. First grade and 12th grade look eerily the same. And why is that? Why are you told what to do, how to do, and when to do it, and then graded on that when you should be solving real-world problems? And I'll tell you, young people are sick and tired of made-up problems. They want to solve the real-world ones. And what 3D printing allows for is a digital and physical integration where you can come up with an idea, create a file for it, print that, make that idea, and then do things with that extend it. So the design challenges, the creative thinking, the problem solving, these are all absolutely fundamental. And it's our belief at the Digital Harbor Foundation that these should be accessible to everybody. This is something that we care deeply about. The digital divide is getting wider, not smaller, and we need to actively and consciously try to overcome that. Additionally, in education, so much time and energy has been spent in certain directions that I disagree with as a classroom teacher, and I stepped into the after-school space for the freedom to show administrators what I was talking about when I was advocating for something different. And we've been creating those now, and I think it's time for that to exist during the school day. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak here today about a little of that. But we see the real-world application of this as tremendous. In fact, we believe that 3D printers can actually pay for themselves. And so in January of this year, we launched something that we call the Perpetual Innovation Fund, which says to teachers anywhere in the country, if you don't have the resources to buy a 3D printer, come up with a business plan of how you're going to use the 3D printer to pay for itself, and we'll give you the printer and the training if you commit to paying it forward. And we've already launched that. We've done a number of schools. We're working with the entire school district here in May. The pilot programs actually already paid it forward in about 2.5 months. And these after-school clubs are really exciting to see what young people are coming up with. But basically, a lot is going on in Baltimore that we're working to solve some real systemic problems, problems that cause a lot of frustration for far too many young people, and we need real solutions to.
Thank you, Andrew. Erin.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Erin Arden. I have the pleasure of leading a department called MakerBot Learning at MakerBot. But I also have a few different jobs. One of the things at MakerBot, even though we've come a long way in a short period of time, is we all wear a lot of hats there. So I'm going to try to explain some of the reasons why I'm on this panel, but it's also fascinating to hear what everyone else is doing, and just to be here today in general is great. So just to give you a little bit of background, because I think this is important in the education space especially, I am not classically trained as a teacher. Most of the people who are in my team who teach every day are not classically trained as educators. Most of the people who I am talking to and who are working with 3D printing are also not all engineers. They're also not all 3D designers or 3D modelers. So one of the things that I really want to stress today especially is 3D printing it's a tool, right? I think everyone has been talking about this a lot across the entire day. That it is there to empower you and kind of change the way that you're thinking about the world, but also what's possible. And it's not so much about the title that you have or the background that you have, that anyone, if you're interested, can get involved with it. So especially in the education space, it's incredibly exciting. So why am I telling you all this? I have a background in graphics and web, so I understand that side of the thing. I'm from the art side, as well as a master's degree at NYU on the digital imaging side of things, right? I loved science as a kid. I loved tinkering, troubleshooting, breaking things, solving problems. But for me, when I was growing up, I hated math, right? I understand the value of math. I get it, but I didn't, it deviated my track away from engineering, away from the things that kind of away from the tech field, and I was going down the track of video games and film and industry and kind of the visualization side. Now, I'm not saying there's a right solution or there's a one-size-fits-all, but what I am trying to kind of shine light at is that there is a different, 3D printing can enable you in so many ways. I had the pleasure of speaking at the New York print show last week, 2 weeks ago? I don't remember, time is a weird thing these days, but what I'm getting at is that I had the pleasure of speaking there, and someone from my team was in the audience, and I had an example of like a small-scale roller coaster that had been uploaded to Thingiverse, which hopefully some of you have heard. And I pointed him out in the room and I said, look, like, I don't know of any other tool set where I could confidently say that not only can I help, like, Project Enable, which is amazing, I can help people build prosthetics and things of that nature, but that I can also move forward and build, if I task my team with building a roller coaster, they could take on that problem and that challenge. Now that's like two drastically different things, right? And I have no background in engineering and I still feel confident that I could troubleshoot my way out of most things. Now, am I going to make a large-scale roller coaster and it's going to work and be safe for people? Who knows, right? That's not the point. The point is that I can look at any problem and because I have 3D printing in my back pocket, I can start figuring out how to make some of these things work. So, being part, now if I take a step back, wearing a few hats, I teach 3D printing at NYU. So on the university side, I can speak to some of that as part of a certificate track that's held there. But from a MakerBot perspective, there's a few very exciting things that we're doing that are going to continue to expand across this year and hopefully beyond, right? Education is a huge thing. And being in, I think, something that, even though the technology has been around for such a long period of time, being in something that is still considered emerging technology, in a sense, right? There's still a lot of very fascinating things that are coming from it. So, being part of MakerBot Learning, and I'll keep this brief, my team goes out and trains people all over the world. I have somebody in Singapore right now, somebody in Florida, and all over, spans the gamut. We're dealing with large corporations as well as educators. Now, when I get asked quite frequently, okay, well, the technology is more approachable, more accessible, kids are using it, people can turn on the printer, press the button, and print something. Yes, all of that is true, and I think MakerBot is helping enable a lot of that. Now, the stuff that we've talked about is how do you actually use it in your workflow? How do you use it as a tool to enable you to make a difference, or your students, or move forward in doing that? And that's a lot of what my team is a part of. One of the things that I want to bring up before I pass the mic over, because I know we have to get to the actual panel part, is that so because we're here in the Capitol, and I don't know if some of you heard recently, actually last week, again, it may be last week or 2 weeks ago, somewhere in the short term, University of Maryland just announced their MakerBot Innovation Center. They just launched that. My team is a large part of what that service is. And when we were talking earlier on the panel of going to scale with students, right? University of Maryland has, what, 40,000, 50,000 students? How do you deal with a scale like that? And make sure that the technology is not hidden away in a room and not touched by anyone. So we're trying to make it more accessible at scale as well at MakerBot. And the MakerBot Innovation Center, which I can speak to more, is a large part of that. But the training and the foundational education and knowledge of what you do with a 3D printer is I think where we can kind of shake things up and do a lot of different things than we've done thus far. And I think it's an incredibly exciting space, especially on the education side of things. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Sophia?
I'll try to be brief because there are a lot of us here and I know we all want to get to the discussion. I, together with my team, created simple 3D modeling software for tablet, where it's called Morphi, M-O-R-P-H-I. It's free on the App Store for iPad and iPad mini, soon coming for Android. People want us to create a desktop version of it as well, so we're working on that, although we originally wanted to do this to enable people to design with their fingers, and something as complex as 3D modeling. We didn't specifically design it for schools, but now it's being used in a lot of schools. We're only 11 months old today, and we're in 79 countries downloaded. And we have a lot of interest among teachers, among students, and even among librarians, because now many libraries are turning into makerspaces. And so we have people of all ages, and the idea was to allow people of all ages to create in 3D using their fingers without Wi-Fi, without a mouse. They could be on a bus or a train, wherever they want to be. And in schools, because teachers don't really like to have the internet on, it's perfect for them because the kids won't be searching the net. It's right on their iPads, and they can use it. So I don't want to take up too much time because we're going to have a demo at the reception. So you guys can check it out there. So maybe I'll end with that. But thank you all for having us here.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. So, and Steph, I know your time is limited here. Maybe we start with the question that you kind of threw out there at the beginning, so folks jump in. But the idea of what really is the role, since we're here in the Capitol, what is the role of government in supporting the continued development of 3D printing in the classroom at all levels? Is it funding? Is it training? What should we be looking for from our government, both local or federal?
The thing I would answer to that question is focusing on real-world problem solving, because the standardized tests that kids spend more and more days a year than ever before taking are not preparing them for the problems and the challenges that businesses have. And so when you step from the classroom into the career, the skill set is not well matched currently. So changing some of the policies around ways that we measure learning, because we do need to measure that. It's formative and summative, but I don't think the way we currently are is benefiting the technology industry.
Yesterday when we were meeting with some of the panelists, I got a text from one of my workers, or actually from our E-rate consultant, that our E-rate just got approved, which was $1.5 million. And without E-rate, we would not be able to do what we're doing. We would not have been able to build the backbone to get to where we are, where we're not just providing coverage on our campuses, we're saturating our campuses with Wi-Fi and connectivity. We wouldn't be able to pull new fiber and put in better access points and get in better switchgear without that E-rate funding. And luckily for our district, we got ahead of things. We're not playing catch-up. A lot of districts are still playing catch-up. If you look at the bandwidth needed for the Common Core and you look at what the federal government put out, districts are struggling to get there. Luckily, we're ahead of the game. So E-rate is a big part of it. Credentialing for teachers is extremely complicated. We have teachers that come from industry that would be awesome in the STEM program, but they can't teach in the STEM program. We have teachers with master's degrees who would be awesome in the program, but can't teach in the program. So credentialing is very problematic. I don't know if this is going to be as controversial as testing in Common Core, but the way we get funded is horrible. We get funded by ADA. We get funded by butts in the seat. We get funded by just taking roll. And that's not necessarily the best model for a blended model, a hybrid model, where kids don't necessarily have to come to class every day. They could use the tools available online and have a hybridized learning environment, and they're at school when they need to be at school and at home when they want to be at home. And that needs to change. And of course, what we're pushing for in our district is a smaller learning community type of model. So not only would the ADA funding need to change, it would need to be restructured to be able to support schools that are using blended learning and hybrid learning and that are going to a smaller learning community model.
John, I don't know if you have any thoughts, but President Obama in the State of the Union talked about free community college. I don't know how soon that's going to happen, but is it funding at the community college level, or is it something else?
Yeah, I was actually going to speak to that just briefly. I also don't know how realistic that will be, but it's a great idea. I love the idea. Since I mentioned that most of our funding comes from a Carl Perkins grant for Associates in Applied Science, and as we're looking, and that's for those who are unfamiliar with that, that's for a 2-year degree that's supposed to be workforce ready. Although I teach in a curriculum that is for AAS students, AA students, continuing education students, I get the gambit. I have 12-year-old students who are homeschooled. I have an 80-year-old NASA retiree who, thank God I have, because sometimes the 3D printers require a rocket scientist. So I've got a wide range of students, and if your funding is dependent upon this program for AAS programs, well, what does that leave for the AA programs, and what does that leave for associates in fine art programs? And so developing some sort of granting situation for those curricula.
Add a point about the community colleges. A good friend of mine is a trustee in the local community college up the street from 2 of our high schools. And we were very excited when President Obama revealed his free college. And one of the things that we sat down and talked about, and there was a more nuanced position that the community colleges could offer 4-year degrees and things that like the 4-year colleges weren't. And that's exciting because let's just say in our region, which is right near a few Air Force bases, maybe the community college is offering degrees in air freight. I don't know, that's not for me to decide. But I could see that our collaboration and partnership with the colleges and the community colleges would be that we're going to get the kids to a certain point, but maybe we don't have the time, resources, and materials to have them take the capstone class, the class that is more detailed, that you might need the rocket scientists in there to help you. But we could get them to that point, and then they could go on to the community colleges. And if that community college could also offer a specialized 4-year degree, which was part of the nuance of the plan, that would be extremely awesome.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, please.
I think what both of you are talking about is very much in line what we have been thinking is important in terms of really trying to establish a pipeline, right? So that in an ideal world, K through 12, middle school, high school, and community college, or whatever higher education a student might pursue, you would have these opportunities for having access to technologies and skill development around printing and making and design and fabrication. One area that I think of particular interest might be that we've been talking to the Department of Education, who of course is very interested in this too, and their current technical education division has actually been looking at ways to basically use funding, for example, like Perkins, to be able to provide additional technical support and resources that would be allocated at the state or local level to community colleges, other current technical education institutions. So last year, the Career Technical Education Division announced that they would be hosting a makeover challenge, and the idea behind that is to provide additional support. So to the extent that, say your community college needs a new set of 3D printers or needs new software, or so that additional information about sort of how that funding mechanism will kind of be distributed is to come, but I just wanted to flag it for you because it is something that is really important to the Department of Education and just really important in general, but it's something that is a priority.
Yeah. One thing I just want to bring up, which is part of what I talked about when I was doing the intro, is that it's not, and I'm saying this in wearing a MakerBot shirt, right? It's not just about getting printers in the hands of educators, because it is partly about that, right? And that's incredibly important, and that's what is going to happen. But I remember being in school, we're almost at the day and age where schools and some educators are still looking at this as if it's like tech class or if it's computer class, right? Like, I'm sure you all remember when computers scaled up, right? We had typing class. We had things that were teaching you how to use the computer in order to start creating things. We're kind of at that level where we're at from a 3D printing sense. Now, again, teaching, it's incredibly important for us to try and teach teachers as much as possible, right? And I'm not just talking about engineers, about STEM, I'm talking about education as a larger focus. I know this is like a very, like a behemoth worth of subjects and kind of possibilities. But I think what's important is that it's, quite often I talk to teachers because we've consulted on curriculum projects and things like that. My team has had the pleasure of doing that. It's often when I talk to universities or K-12, they're very much focused on like, we need to build a certification for 3D printing. And now I'm saying this and sitting here and I teach a certification at NYU in 3D printing, right? So I know what I'm saying is a little conflicting. But it's not just about this technology, right? It's about what you can make using this technology. And that's incredibly important, right? Like the strides that Autodesk is making in making their tools more accessible, the strides that to my left that is making in building out design tools, that it's not just somebody who knows how to 3D design, it's anyone who's starting to use that technology. That's incredibly important, and I think the grants and the funding and getting the printers in the classrooms is one first step. But quite often we'll hear at MakerBot, it's empowering the teachers beyond that, right? We need to, quite often we'll hear they got the grant, they got the funding, and now the printer's collecting dust, or it's a student who's running the printer because they know how to do it better than the teachers, right? So, but we need to teach them and drive that further, and I think that's really important to focus on as well.
Okay. And folks, we have about 10 or 15 minutes left, so we can open up for questions. I have other questions, but I see a hand, so I'm going to let you guys go ahead.
Yes.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Ara Bogosian, 3D Hubs, Virginia. I also teach design for manufacturing at the tech shop. But regarding public schools and community colleges, I like the idea of printers paying for themselves. One of my goals in life is to establish community 3D printing centers or factories. So in the future, there'll be no more shipping, no more garbage collection. Everything gets recycled back into the local community. Every neighborhood will have a local factory. So why not have these community colleges become those factories? So they become free, and all the students, regardless if you're technical or not, because you don't have to be that technical to do 3D printing, are essentially the employees that are generating revenues for the community college for their own education. We already have the infrastructure in place. We have the buildings in place. And as a 3D Hub member, I can see all the orders that are coming in from all these new inventors that are seeing that it is affordable to create new products. So the demand is there, it's growing. Staples just announced that they want to serve the small business inventor and small business startups with 3D printing. So if they are going into it, it's obvious that the demand is there. So I think it's time we start a program with community colleges and convert them into our local neighborhood factories.
So panel, is that how we get to the free community college? Right.
Well, the one thing I will say to that is, I think reevaluating the school and the education system to say, let's start solving real world problems is absolutely essential, right? Because, it used to be that when the modern public education system was created, it was during the industrial era where work was dangerous, dirty, deadly even. And so the progressive era, for those that are familiar with some of the history of this country, right, created the modern public education system to protect young people from that. But in today's world, being protected from the world of work is borderline obsolescence. And so how do we kind of pull those two back together and have community colleges or schools or rec centers creating real world value, which is far more interesting. And you'll spend a lot more time on it as a learner solving that real world problem than you will any worksheet that any teacher, no matter how good, can make. And that's what I'm interested in seeing is real world problem solving. And I think we need to find ways to formally support informal learning. And that's something that I think everyone on this panel has sort of talked about, whether it's Erin specifically about, these people aren't coming from these specific backgrounds that have credentials, to figuring out different ways to credential people. Formally supporting informal learning is absolutely essential to figuring out sort of the next wave. And I'm very hopeful about the way education has the potential to change, right? Apple missed the whole CD read-write and skipped right to digital download. I think education missed the whole internet, but can skip to the next generation, right? We have the potential to leapfrog, but we need to be thoughtful and active to get there.
So, two things. One, a little bit on what he said. You might want to pick up Alan November's book called Who Owns the Learning? And it's an easy read, it's approachable, and it details what his students were doing in the community to affect change. So that's a little bit on that. And on what you're saying, and you started saying it's getting a lot easier for the students to use 3D printing, so on and so forth. That is true. However, I think we all agree that the students who will be successful in that are going to come to that with a certain specific set of skills. They need to be able to work collaboratively. They need to have design thinking, right? They need to know that when they are fast prototyping, that they're going to struggle, that they need to persevere, that they need to continue on. So there's a certain sort of growth mindset that they have to have for them. So if the machines are getting easier and easier, which I don't doubt that they are, I hope they are, but the child, the students, the college student need to be able to work in that environment. And that environment is more entrepreneurial, isn't it? Like they're not going to the factories. I am not preparing kids in our school district to go to factories. There's no way. But do I want them to have that entrepreneurial feel, to be able to be agile and responsive and to change their career path when that career dries up, to see that coming? Those are the skill sets the kids are going to need to be able to work in those environments. And yes, they can work at the community college.
Can you repeat that book name again?
Alan November, and it's Who Owns the Learning?
How is Alan's A-L-A-N?
A-L-A-N, yes.
I also wanted to mention one thing while we're on this topic of where to go to 3D print. There are two big categories of places that are becoming more and more important. First are libraries. Many public libraries across the country and even in other parts of the world are acquiring 3D printers, the grants and other sources, even through their own members raising money. So those are going to become more accessible. And then makerspaces. There are makerspaces in every country virtually. I'm a longstanding member of several of them. One, which is the first makerspace I joined on 14th Street, Hack Manhattan, in New York City, where for a small fee you can pay money and you can use any machine. And as Erin was saying, 3D printing is one tool, and many tools. You can use 3D modeling to also convert the file to be used on a laser cutter. Or you don't even have to print. So, I think we have to see the larger picture here, which I think, will be helpful when we start to focus specifically on the education context and specifically, K through 12, where these kids are essentially growing up with this technology.
I'll see if I can chime in here. Ara, I like your idea. And I think it solves a very real problem that academia has to face, because they like to be in silos. And one of the things that I know that whenever I talk about crossing out of art into STEM curricula and making partnerships, is sometimes there's the issue of who's accountable for the numbers, who's accountable for the seat count, and where does that money come from? As an outside vendor, and this is also for anyone else who wants to take Ara's idea, as an outside vendor, no one worries about that, because that onus is kind of on you. And that kind of frees up the school to at least have some liberty to be like, yeah, we can partner with that pretty easily. So that's a brilliant idea.
I want to try to future-proof your idea too, though. So you specifically focused on, solving real problems with 3D printers. I would say that your big idea is that and I'll put this at the high school level, I want our high schools to be learning incubators, innovative incubators. And I want that innovation to spill out into the community to solve real-world problems. And so if your community colleges are the incubators and they're going out and solving the real-world problems, then that's the big idea. Right now, we're focused on 3D printers. 20 years from now, who knows? But if the big idea is that they become those incubators and that spills out into the community to solve real-world problems, that is the awesome concept.
Other questions, or?
Well, someone raises their hand, I'll keep this really brief, I promise. So MakerBot Innovation Centers, as I mentioned, at University of Maryland is one great example. Xavier University launched their Innovation Center back a few months ago. What we've seen in their Innovation Center is, an entire school spawned out of innovation. They genuinely have a school that's targeted towards towards innovation and creative thinking and problem solving and design thinking. Now, you were mentioning how can community colleges be kind of a small scale or a large scale manufacturing. MakerBot Innovation Centers are one kind of step into that, and I'm sure there will be many more, right? But what's interesting about part of the model that we're building is a few things. One is that there's software to manage many printers, right? So, and that's specific to our MakerBot Innovation Centers. The other thing is that we're at a phase, and I like to say this from an innovation center perspective, where we have desktop 3D printers that started democratizing this and giving people more access to 3D printing. And it wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you couldn't touch the product. You were concerned that it was going to break, right? We're talking about it's easy, more accessible, etc. But a MakerBot Innovation Center, what it does is it brings it back to almost the computer lab mentality. It allows you to have a collaborative space from a student perspective, but also there's overflow into the community. So the reason why I'm bringing up Xavier University is most recently, they built an entire project. Now they got their Innovation Center in February, and for the end of the semester, students who had no idea how to design, no background in this, even a new school within an already established university, they built a prosthetic for a dog that needed a prosthetic. And that was the community seeing this news story and reaching out to their center that they had now here on site. So there are things that are popping up, even if it's something that is enabling the teachers, the students, it's also spilling out into the community, and they're reaching back to build service bureaus, to build models. So I agree completely, right? I mean, that mentality is something that we're seeing proliferate even now.
Back here, we had a question.
Yeah, along the same lines of makerspaces in libraries and community colleges, but at the same time, you manage what you measure, and these are some great benefits that you get from having public access to makerspaces and to 3D printing. So how do you measure something as intangible as community development or improved entrepreneurial mindset to your funders and students?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. It's something that we've been working on is how do we measure learning in ways if I'm saying let's stop doing so much standardized testing, what do we do in terms of that? There's some great research by a professor by the name of Duckworth who's looking at grit scores, ways to measure the grit, determination, perseverance. Now there's some things that you should be cautious of. You should not measure someone's grit score every day. That is not a good thing to do, but you should measure that because those types of behaviors will lead to entrepreneurial activities. Another one is divergent thinking. And there's tests that look at ways that individuals can come up with different solutions to similar problems instead of convergent thinking, which is everyone arriving at a predetermined answer, discovering the answer when it's really just compliance with a predetermined set of steps. We need to be able to think differently, and the internet, if anything, has made that possible for different ideas to rise up and to be seen. So physical spaces and the way we measure those need to adapt. But it's a difficult question that we need to spend time and energy figuring out.
And if you're measuring it the way schools, at least in California, have traditionally been measuring stuff where they've been chasing API and they've been chasing high school exit exam scores, that measurement's going to fall short. When I'm talking about blended and hybrid learning, we're seeing a higher level of student engagement. We're funded by ADA. We're funded by butts in the seat. So what we should be seeing is more butts in the seat. We should be seeing more kids there, and we're seeing that. So there's other measurements that can take place, and there's self-assessment measurements that we could start doing now. Students' own self-assessment on their satisfaction at school. That's another measurement. So I'm not so for focusing so much on that high-stakes measurement. I was an English teacher, if I had not mentioned that before. I taught struggling readers at the high school level, at all levels, and it was very apparent to me that I should not measure them using the traditional model of measurement. But yet, when we changed what they did in the classroom and they were more happy and more engaged, their own self-assessment would tell you they had more satisfaction with school, which would help solve your dropout problems, which are going to help solve a bunch of other problems. So as far as trying to solve using that traditional rubric of chasing the API, I'm not even going to try to tackle that. I'm just going to tell you that there are other metrics that you can use.